There's something about human psyche that when we hear the term new technologies, it just excites us. I mean, there's a range of emotions that one goes through. It sounds very thrilling to begin with. There's a hope that there's more safety in the newer technology that is coming in. And then you start thinking that there has been a lot of R&D that has gone on behind the scene. There have been prototypes which have been developed. A lot of test flying has been done by the brand or whosoever is coming out with that new technology in their own field. And there's a very famous kind of saying which goes around in paragliding world that to be the best in paragliding, you have to fly the best equipment. That is the very first thing that you accomplish. And then everything else follows it. So this month's topic is all about exploring new technologies in our sport of paragliding. Every now and then we see some designer, someone having the will and the zeal and the fire inside them, challenging the status quo and saying that, hey, we're going to do things differently and we're going to add more fun to flying. So I thought, who better than bringing in a person who has basically revolutionized flying? So far, we are used to seeing paragliders move in horizontal direction when we are floating through air. And the vertical energy conversion is very limited. But this brand and the people behind it thought outside the box and have created a toy which allows us to expand our horizons of flying paragliders even more. So merging the kiting and the paragliding concept has added a lot of fun in soaring scenarios for now. However, the beauty of this tech is that it is just starting out. And who knows, maybe we are seeing something similar in thermic scenarios. Maybe we are going to see something coming out like that in racing paragliders, in World Cups and all of that. But we'll leave all of that to the designers. And I hope some of them, the ones which are coming on board this month, will be able to throw some light on what's coming up. But to begin with, this is episode number 1 of the topic new technologies. And here is a very special man, very passionate person about his craft, Beni Kälin. He's the owner of Speed Flying School, has an amazing way of teaching and imparting knowledge, and has been instrumental in bringing this technology to life and making it accessible to everyday pilots like me and you. So, without further ado, let's dive right into this very holistic conversation with Beni. Super thankful that he finally came on board and took out time from his busy schedule because I've been chasing him for quite a while. But regardless, it was worth the wait. The content is absolutely amazing, and I hope you like it. Beni Kälin, so nice to see you finally, man. Welcome to Paragliding Atlas. Thank you for doing this.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, no, I mean, your content and every single thing that you put out online is pretty inspiring. And it had been at the back of my mind as a host of the show because this initiative is all about information sharing. And I think the way you guys have new technologies coming out in the sport and the amount of fun that is being had with those new technologies, people want to know what goes on behind the scene. And how do you guys manage it? So, I mean, if I have to begin, on some note, Speed Flying School, how did this happen in your life, and why did you start? What's the motivation behind such an amazing institute?
I basically got into speed flying when I was 20 years old, and I became a paragliding instructor when I was 22, and then I worked for a big school here for many years, and then we separated, and I founded my own school, and there's just in the state where I live here, Bern, there's 18 paragliding schools. So there's literally at least one school in every valley. So I felt like, hey, I want to do something different. So that's kind of why I named my paragliding school Speed Flying School, because we do also teach paragliding, not just speed flying and speed riding. And we also teach paragliding a bit in a different way. We do 3 weeks courses. We teach people in 3 weeks in a row in so-called intense courses instead of where people just come and join whenever they want, and then usually they spread it out over a year. So yeah, we try to do things a little bit different, and that's why I found okay, this name Speed Flying School, it suits also for my paragliding school.
No, for sure. And I think your idea of doing things differently seemed to be working so well because I'm pretty sure the amount of passion you have behind the project is turning out some really safe and knowledgeable pilots. But do you want to throw some light on doing things differently, like especially teaching 3 weeks intensive rather than just going the other way around, like how everybody else plays?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I think globally seen, the standard way to learn paragliding is doing like a week course, a 10-day course, or like a 2 weeks course. But somehow here in Switzerland, that's really not the standard. The standard here in Switzerland is doing like 4 or 5 days, like a basic course with the equipment included. And then people sign up for the license course, which they have usually like a year time. So a year to get their 50 flights that they need at least to go for the exam here in Switzerland. And then it really spreads out, and there's quite a lot of people along the way that stop because they don't fly on a regular base. And if you don't fly on a regular base, then you never really get the confidence you should, and that subtle feeling we need in that sport, you don't really get that. And yeah, obviously when you do it 3 weeks in a row and you really fully in there, you commit to it and you get a lot better, a lot more confident, and that subtle feeling, that judgment for landings and things. We all know, how it is when you fly on a regular base, when you go on a 2 weeks paragliding holiday.
It just feels better under the canopy. You're just more confident every flight after. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You're much more connected to the wing when you do it, on a daily basis than when you're not flying for a while and you put yourself back on the wing. And that's really I think the biggest advantage here on the course for the students. And for me as an instructor, the big advantage is that I have the same people every day. I do get to know them really well, and they all advance as a group. Because normally in the system here we have in Switzerland, it's a very mixed level. The students have between 3 flights and 100 flights, and then you as an instructor, you try to teach them all on the same day and the same location, and some students, they want a thermal and stay up 2 hours, and the other ones would not like to fly at all while there's thermic air and turbulence out there. And it's just
total sense.
difficult to, then to make everyone happy. And here, at least the people have all more or less the same experience. There's still people that want to fly more thermals and some that want to fly less thermals, but at least they have very similar experiences, and that makes it much more easy for me to teach them and to kind of, bring in like a continuation, a progress in during the course. Start with easy flights, with big landings, easy takeoffs, and then you can progress during the course with the whole group. Because otherwise, there's always some beginners in the group where you can't take to an advanced landing site or takeoff site because it's too early for them. They're not ready for it yet. And here, this is a lot less of a problem.
Makes total sense. And I think safe progression is the word that we should be mentioning here, because there are many other ways to progress as well. But if you're shitting your pants while progressing, then it's not a lot of fun. So progressing safely and confidently. But you seem to be pushing the limits quite a lot with your flying yourself as a person. Do you get students who kind of are inspired by your lifestyle and kind of want to become follow down your lanes, and do you have in what I'm trying to understand is the psychology of an instructor in those cases? Do you try to hold back, or do you try to give as much as you can, even though it's very early stages for them? Because I certainly resonate when I was kind of learning this sport. I wanted to go all guns blazing, and and I did not have enough trust in my first instructor, whether he was giving me the right amount of push or pull at the same time. So do you find those situations, if any, challenging to navigate, or what's your way out of those moments?
It's funny. I don't think I'm pushing the sport really. It's just I'm just interested in new things, And with new technology like a flare system now, with those parakites, there's new possibilities popping up, and I just like exploring what is possible with these new things. I don't think I do very extreme things, I also fly them quite a lot. It might look extreme for you or for somebody watching it, but understanding the technology and understanding my experience with that new technology behind it, for me, this is Mostly totally comfort zone. Like I try not to do things where I'm scared of. But of course, for other people, this looks like is crazy, and they can't imagine this because they don't know the technology and they don't know what is possible with it and how much experience someone has put into it. That's why it might look crazy. To me, I try to always be in the comfort zone, and that's also where I teach my students, like paragliding or also speed flying or speed riding. It should all be done in the comfort zone. You're up in the air, and there's always that risk of falling down. Like it can be bigger or smaller, but it is gravity, and you just can't cheat it. Whatever goes up can go down, and you should never forget about this and lose that respect. I think that that's very important. And I think sometimes for people coming from different sports, like climbing or bodybuilding or whatever, there are sports that you have to push the limits. If you're a sports climber and you want to climb A or 9 grade one day, you have to push the limits. You have to keep on going, even if you're scared, even if your hands can't hold on anymore. You still have to push and just go for it until you just slip off and fall into that rope. And if you can't push there, then I think you have a very slow progression. And I think it's super important to understand in those air sports that this is not the case. This might be beneficial when you try to learn acro maneuvers for a while, that when you're, a bit of a bold pilot, you progress a little quicker, but essentially you will get a bad experience and it's going to throw you back a lot, and you'll be way more scared than ever before and maybe never even overcome that bad experience anymore, that fear. And you've actually slowed yourself down a lot more than you've gained with pushing a little bit too hard, And I really try to get that to students across. It's sometimes hard, because they see what all the things I'm doing, and then I tell them not, to push too hard at the same time. But yeah, that's obviously I'm trying this. Yeah.
No, I get your dilemma, Benny. But honestly, the question pops in my mind that you started when you were 20. 20 by no means is an early start in a lot of conventional sports, because I do come from a conventional sports background, and over there they said that you have to get into it at 7 or 9 or early 10, like for example, a soccer player, and if you want to be the best in the world, like by the time you're 14, 15, you're already building up on your international career, and some even debut at those like 16, 17 ages. Aerial sports is very different, but it is the glory that the competing or the satisfaction that humans are chasing, that they're looking from competing, is kind of same as it is in conventional sports. You're becoming better of other people, and then there's there's a reward for being better. How did you choose? I mean, even if you didn't push the limits outside, but what was your definition of pushing the limits within comfort zone, and how did you navigate that risk versus reward spectrum while you were trying to get better version of yourself every day, even though the age that you started was a little bit later, that a lot of pilots these days are starting? And I mean, you see pilots flying competition wings at the age of 18, 19 and World Cups already.
Well, first of all, I don't think I'm that good of a pilot as you might think. I think there's so many better paragliding pilots out there than I am. I've never done a single paragliding competition.
I meant speed flying as well, the whole ecosystem.
Many speed fly pilots that can do what I can do, or have even a better level and speed riding anyway, because I'm not that good of a skier. I really don't think I'm a exceptional pilot. I think some of the things I'm doing is actually pretty easy to achieve for somebody. But what sometimes people think I might be such a good pilot is just because I'm kind of exploring that new technology and showing things that haven't been done before with that new technology. But I don't think it's actually that difficult, and I think with that new technology, there's going to be many people that can do things like that, Yeah. So again, for me, it's not as extreme. I think a lot of it is that new technology that makes things very easy, but if you don't realize that, you think, wow, this is crazy. Yeah.
All right, now I get it. Instagram versus reality is a different version, and of course, I see you from a 6-inch screen every day, so it's a very different perception, I believe. Now, talking about new technologies, Benny, GoFlare Global basically came in and kind of redefine what having fun means and increase the spectrum. What was the thought process behind, like how did this project originate? Because I saw Jan Baptiste, putting across a video and like pretty much going crazy. And then like when I look at the website on like GoFred Global, you have the other Benny Bully and Arwen. Like he is one of the legendary. I think he is quite an accomplished paraglider pilot. So how did, if you can just talk about behind the scenes, like how did you guys plan to come up with something like this?
I wasn't involved from the very beginning. Skywalk has been working on this mustache wing way before I joined them. And they had a pretty much finished product. They just never really dared to sell it, or they were undecisive what to market it for. It was a closed cell wing, like the kites. And yeah, somehow they never threw this on the market. And I started flying a lot with the Ozone race kites on Dune de Pila. And I remember exactly my first flight with one of those kites. And I realized, hey, wow, this is awesome. This is a completely different way of flying. And it completely blew me away. The energy there was in this kite and the range it has. And then I started soaring around with this a lot there and really started pushing the limits there. Obviously, always like super low to the ground. And yeah, and then I started flying those kites in the mountains as well, and I just saw a huge potential. And basically, when you fly those kites, I had a 7-meter 11 and a 17, and basically the 11-meter kite, it glided like a paraglider almost, and it had the speed of like 6-7 meter speed wing. It was just an incredible machine. Like it puts every other speed flyer I have ever flown. It just makes it looks like a kid's toy, basically.
So yeah. it's like a speed wing on steroids, but the profile of the kite.
Yeah, totally. Like there was such a huge step from those speed wings to this kite. You can't imagine. It's like going from an A wing to probably like a competition hang glider kind of thing.
Wow.
And performance, it's just unreal, And then I hear that.
I mean, just for the perspective of our listeners, you basically attach the kite risers on carabiners, and that those carabiners were attached to a paragliding harness, and that was your setup when you were having fun.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do they have those kind of riders? Like, is it possible to fit in a paragliding harness? Like, can you put a board harness and like a kite and kind of make it work?
Yeah. It actually works pretty simple. Amazingly simple. It works. Yeah. But it's still a kite, and if this thing does collapse, it might not reopen, so as long as you don't fly, higher than you want to fall, I guess this is a good thing to do. But once you start flying a little bit higher, this is definitely not safe.
So basically, you got a really fun hoverboard. Like, I mean, you were at the height, which was almost skimming the ground, and you were going super fast. And
yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I didn't use any board. That was just,
I was giving an example. You were basically skimming the height hoverboard. Was not the best example, but that sounds so much fun. Like proximity to the ground, because then you can just feel the speed and sense the speed a lot more than normal wing or normal flying.
Exactly. Yeah. That's totally how it was. Yeah. And then basically I hear that Skywalk had this project. They called it Sky Carver. And I was like, hey guys, if there's any way I can help you with that, like I'm totally in. Like I think this is the future of soaring. And I showed them, what I've done with the kites and videos. And I showed them as well, hey, I think soaring and speed flying, this is the future. Yeah, and then, Benny Belly, he came over one day with his old prototypes and we flew them here and started that project again. And Benny basically then, 2 years later, finished the project more or less on his holidays and came out with this mustache. Yeah, we're super happy with it, with the product, and also with the way it's working, with how people are using it. For me, I see it like a perfect wing that enables people to fly on the coast in stronger winds that have not been flying in that strong winds before, I can also take a speed wing, or I can take a mini wing, or I can fly a two-liner, and soar it in 50 k's of winds. I have the skills to do so, but I say for the regular pilot, he's not going to want to fly a Enzo in 50 k's of winds, but he can safely and like relaxed do this on a Moustache without having to be a superhero.
Wow.
This is fairly easy on a Moustache, so it really makes this strong wind flying accessible for a big range of pilots. It's obviously, it can go fast and you have to be able to deal with the speed, but it makes coastal soaring so much easier. And I think that's why there's so many stoked pilots, flying a Moustache. And obviously as well, because you have the ability to dive and to convert your speed back into lift and that high stability, and you don't have to worry about collapses. So yeah, in a way it's more fun because you have that extra dive. You can choose how high you want to fly. It's not the wing or the wind that decides on which height on the ridge you're actually soaring. It's you, by holding the toggles higher or lower and making more or less lift, and that's really cool, because then when you fly close to the ground, you get that sensation of speed, and you're not just stuck up there and thinking like, okay, how do I get down? What can I do? And I think that accessibility, that it's really easy to fly a Moustache on the right spot. I think, it can be difficult, obviously, top landing it again on small spots and things. You need certain skills, but in general, people are surprised how easy this is to fly, and yeah, now I think we've made the same step with the line, the flare line. It basically makes flying close to the ground, whether this is snow or grass, and we fly as the grass, it just makes it safer because you can climb a lot more. You can increase your glide ratio a lot more than you can do on a classic speed wing. So if you're flying close to the ground and there's something ahead of you, there's sinking air or whatever, and you need lift, you can get a lot more lift from that wing, basically.
Wow.
And to stay along the ground, you have to do less turns. You can, if you have a good slope, you can just go straight down the slope without having to do any turns to follow it, just by going hands up and down. So this is like, it can be literally really, really easy. Yeah.
No, I love it. And I think it sounds like unlimited fun, basically, whenever you have these wings above your head, with the amount of possibilities that you said, within their spectrum. But I'm curious, Benny, like when you explain it that well, what is the most boring flying that Moustache or line can offer? Like, where do you start? Like, if you're a paraglider pilot and you don't know what speed wings are, and you don't know what mini wings are, but somehow you see the content and the technology and all of this amazing things out there, and you're keen to get your hands on one of the Moustaches and lines. First of all, doesn't make sense to grab even the bigger sizes of one of these? And secondly, what do baby steps under these wings look like for someone who's coming off from just paragliding background and not smaller wings?
Yeah, I think it's super important to realize that a line is made for speed flying and a Moustache is made for soaring. So if you're a paraglider pilot and you take a Moustache on a normal paragliding takeoff with no soaring possibilities, you can totally take it off there. Even if there's no wind, you can land it. If there's a big landing, it's fairly easy. I think if you know how to inflate it, how to launch it, people get along pretty quickly. But you can't really get the sense of what this actually can do. So if you really want to try a Moustache, I think you almost need to soar it to realize what this thing is capable of doing. Like, I usually tell people, the moment you realize what the Moustache is actually capable of is when you stand on a dune and there's like 50 k's of wind blowing in your face, and you stand there with a 15 or 18 meter wing without leaning forward. You just stand there and you think, oh, could be more wind, and you there's almost sand blowing into your eyes, and this is fucking stormy. And exactly, like, I would not stand here with any other wing, not even with a mini wing. but it's totally easy for a mustache. I think that's like the moment where you realize what this wing actually, how much this is a game changer, you know? So yeah, basically it makes sense to take it soaring to really understand the possibility of these things. But it's super easy just to take a 20-meter, 22-meter mustache, or even an 18 to a normal takeoff with a little bit of a headwind, and you have a bit of a valley breeze at the landing. I think it's really not a big deal. You know, there's a lot of pilots that can do this, you know, and they'll figure out how to fly these things fairly quickly, you know, I would say. I think the most important thing is that you try not to land on a small landing. Same thing with a line. They're kind of hard to, let's say, to make a spot landing at the beginning, you know. Usually at the beginning, people end up come a little bit short or go a little bit far. Yeah. You kind of have to get used to that a little bit. It usually flares further than they think, you know, and then people come back and they're like, this thing flares forever. And I'm like, that's why it's called flare.
Yeah. No, I think the way you guys are going, swooping in skydiving seems soon going to be out of fashion, because paragliders seem to be having a lot of fun with these technologies and for a lot less money, basically.
I think so too, yeah.
No, that's amazing. But, you know, I mean, I was wondering from paraglider's perspective, when we try and learn a few things in paragliding after kind of graduating from the school, like after having the basic knowledge of an instructor. Now, I personally felt that it was very difficult for anyone to say that, okay, I'm gonna put in this much of money every year and save it up and spend it on SIVs, because, okay, you can pay for someone instructors up to a certain point, whereafter you have to learn and figure it out yourself, because it's not financially sustainable to hire an instructor every time you go out there and push the limits. So I naturally tried to, you know, start looking at videos and start looking for information that was online, and started reading, you know, posts and people's experiences. And eventually I was like, okay, if I find a trustworthy instructor sharing his knowledge on YouTube on how to recover asymmetric, or how to recover a spiral dive, or any of these SIV maneuvers, I can try and gain something out of it, and I can apply it safely in my own in my own training, because I have been under the training of an instructor who has shown me how to do it correctly once. Can something similar be applied in these new technologies, where you have YouTube videos where they're teaching you skills, and even though it's a brand new technology, even though you might not have had a chance for an instructor who is specifically trained to impart training on line or flare, because most of the instructors just know how to teach paragliding. No, there are not a lot of instructors who know how to teach mustache flying or line flying. So can people look at YouTube videos and try and, you know, learn something from it while staying safe? Like, is it a good idea, or should everybody just try and reach out to one of the schools who are teaching this and then only put their trust over there?
I think it's never wrong going with an instructor. But as you said, there's not that many instructors out there that already have experience with parakites that can actually teach people, you know, like more that, you know, you can find on our, for example, flare tutorial videos anyway. I think, you know, someone that has a decent amount of experience in paragliding, he's going to figure it out really quickly by himself. Someone that is pretty new, that has basically just got his paragliding license, he can go on a mustache or even on a line pretty quickly as well, but he needs to be smart about it. So both wings, they have quite a lot of roll. So I think you have to be able to deal with the roll, that you don't start rolling around, you know, uncontrolled. And you have to be able to deal with the speed, or you have to, you know, be able to learn with it. So you have to fly a big enough size first, you know, and not go on a too small size too quick. I think for both wings, it's great to start with ground handling, obviously, run around on the field and you know, get to know the stall point, get to know where the, you know, the maximum lift is and everything. And if you've done that, you're going to be already very confident on launch, and landing is also going to be less of a problem. And yeah, especially soaring a mustache, I think you can really, if you have a good spot, like sandy spots, some dunes, you can really learn that yourself easily, you know. That's why we have made those tutorial videos, on YouTube with Flare to give pilots the knowledge they need to have to fly these things. But it's funny because the other brands don't do this for their standard paragliders. You get the impression that these things are super extreme. Like a Moustache is such an extreme wing, and you need a special education and everything to be able to fly one. It's not at all like this. It's just because the Moustache was the first paraglide out there, and there's some things, there's some bad habits that can fuck you up on launch if you're doing this. And that's why we made those videos, But once it's very few things, and I think for many pilots it's pretty straightforward. I'm always surprised how quickly people get along with this. I have put a lot of people on a Moustache and already on a line, and I'm always surprised how quickly people figure this out. Yeah.
No, that's good to hear that it's. I mean, it looks something really fun. So you obviously figure out that if it's a lot of fun, that means it's a lot of work to get to that lot of fun part. But if you're saying it's quicker, then I think me, including a lot of listeners, will be stoked to give it a shot one day.
Yeah, exactly. I think the most important thing is try it in forgiving terrain. So if you want to go on a line, if you have skis and you have an easy takeoff, easy terrain, go do it on skis. If you want to try a Moustache, go somewhere there is not a cliff where you have to top land and for soaring, go somewhere with a beach, easy launch, you can land on the beach, and maybe even sand dunes. And in this environment, you can really progress a lot and even make some mistakes, and it's quite forgiving. I think that's kind of the most important thing if you want to go and teach this yourself without an instructor, that you have a forgiving landscape around you.
No, it makes sense. The safety net should be as wide and as broad as possible before.
Exactly.
Yeah. Beni, takes me to a point, if there is someone out there listening, I have had that mindset myself some of the times where I'm like, this seems to be within my comfort zone, and I would like to push the limits a bit more. We all have that, I think, inherent, part of our brain telling us that you are capable of doing this, and even though it looks a bit scarier, but you want to. So I'm just wondering if there is someone who does not come from coast, who lives in the foothills, and is living in a thermic site, still decides to take this up on a thermic site. What is the worst that can happen? Like, how does shitting your pants under a Moustache look like? Because under a paraglider, it's just like there are collapses and it can cascade and there can be twists, and then it's history. Then you deploy the reserve. But what can happen in a paraglide if you put it to thermic conditions in the mountain?
I don't exactly know. I've never had a collapse. But I tell people, just be smart about it. You can totally fly them through thermals. We just marketed the Moustache to not fly in thermals because it's so easy to fly this wing in strong wind. And strong wind, that with 50 k's of wind, the wind has 4 times the energy than 25 k's of wind what you're normally flying. So the turbulence, if you hit a lee side in 50 k's, is also 4 times as bad. And then if you have 50 k's of wind and you have strong thermals in there on top, and people fly hands up, also the Moustache is going to collapse at some stage. And we knew the Moustache is pretty collapse stable. It's more collapse stable than any other paraglider out there flying on full bar. But the thing is, on a paraglider, there is this psychological hurdle. Like anyone knows that has a bit of experience, if I push that speed bar, I'm faster, but I'm more likely to get a collapse. And if I do get a collapse, more likely to lose control. At least anyone that has done an SIV and pulled some, speed bar asymmetrics has that respect built in from then on.
Definitely.
Yeah.
When it hits you, yeah.
Exactly. And you feel it and you get that respect. That's the good thing about doing an SIV. So there's that psychological barrier of pushing that speed bar. And with a paraglide, with those risers, this is completely gone. It's super easy to go hands up, and people go hands up all the time. There's zero psychological barrier of going full speed.
Okay.
And we were aware of this, and that's why we try to keep people safe and warn people like, hey, this thing is super stable, even full bar, which is only hands up. You don't have to push anything, but it can still collapse, and that's why we've marketed like don't fly in thermals and blah blah blah. But in fact, it works as well as on a paraglider, or actually even better because it's more stable. But we didn't want to people fly brainless in 50, 60 k's of wind with strong thermic in there, because we knew they were going to go hands up without thinking about it. And that's the whole reason behind it. So when people want to fly through thermals, I just tell them, go for it, do it, but fly in best glide, which is quite low on your hands. That's the normal trim position on a paraglider. Don't fly hands up. And then your wing is maybe not more stable, probably it is more stable, but if you do get a collapse, you're not flying fully accelerated. So if you do get a collapse when flying slow, the collapse is going to be a lot more gentle, and you can react to it better, I guess. So basically that's what I recommend people, just fly through thermal slowly and fly active, and then there's no worries about it.
What's the collapse behavior difference between a mustache and a regular paraglider? Like, I mean, how would a SIV look under a mustache compared to a regular paraglider?
That's a good question. You can't pull collapses on a mustache. You can do pull-ups on the A lines.
I mean, even with the collapse lines like we do on
if you have holding line, it would work. Yes, it is actually pretty gentle, the reaction from the mustache to collapses, because the wing is quite soft. It's not tensioned a lot. It's built in a very forgiving way, surprisingly forgiving. I would say it's not any worse than a sea glider, but it's just a rough guess. But when you take a collapse and you go hands up, then the glider is fully accelerated. And a glider that is fully accelerated, it doesn't have a lot of pressure inside, so it takes a long time to reinflate. You can very well notice this when you do big ears and you have the speed bar pushed, and then you let go the A line. Then on a lot of gliders, the ears just stay in. They don't inflate until you release the speed bar. So it's a little bit the same thing with a mustache. If you get a big collapse and you're just staying hands up, it takes a very, very long, quite a long time to fully inflate the gun all the way into the tips. It works much quicker if you actually counter steer and pump it open. If you give it a pump, the collapse side, then it re-inflates very quickly. I think that's like the main difference, A fair comparison would be taking a normal paraglider to an SIV and make a full speed bar collapse and stay on speed bar and stay hands up.
Wow. Man, that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, exactly.
That's scary.
And on a mustache, this is even surprisingly gentle.
Wow.
This is just a guess, but I think the mustache, it would actually be more gentle than some other sea wings in that case, But we don't have a lot of experiences with collapses because they don't happen much.
That's such a good way to put it. But I'm just wondering, when you're developing a wing like this, I mean, of course, there must have been some history that would have gone into the project before it was restarted again. But what effort does the manufacturer or the production team put when it comes to trying and feeling what life under it looks like when it is not so good? Like, do you guys take it out and just keep on collapsing it again and again and keep on how does testing look like? What did your protos kind of do when you were what were the possibilities at that time? If you can just talk about that.
That's an interesting question. In fact, I think the paragliding brands, they do this a lot because they have to pass that certification. So for the normal paraglider test pilots, it's very important that their wing has this exact, behavior.
Recovery behavior, I think.
Recovery behavior that it can pass that certification. And they put a lot of effort to reach this. We didn't do that effort. We put a lot of effort into, or especially Beni, he's the genius behind it, I'm just the one telling him no, it's got to go faster or got to do this better, whatever. But he's the genius behind it. I don't understand 10% of what he does and understands, But basically, we just focus on making these things stable enough that collapses do not happen in those conditions it's made for. I think when you're soaring or when you're speed flying close to the ground, it doesn't matter too much if you get a full speed bar collapse and your wing turns 130 degrees or 150 degrees. You're going to hit the ground anyway. You know what I mean? It's much more important that your wing does not collapse while you're flying close to the ground. So that, I think, is a much more important case also when it comes to speed flying wings, you know. And I think it's the same with say paramotor wings, you know. Paramotor wings are also the full reflex glide.
Yeah. They just keep on going. Yeah.
Exactly. For those, it's important not to have a gentle collapse behavior. It's important to not collapse at all. That's kind of a very different mentality in a way. In paragliding, everyone is worried about how it does collapse, but I actually rather have a wing that does not collapse at all. In the first hand, and you know, my second worry is how the reaction is going to be. But I'm actually happier flying a wing that does not collapse. You know what I mean? It's a very different mentality in a way.
I think I find it very easy to resonate with it because when I talk to non-flyers, you know, when I talk to my friends who don't fly, they're like, dude, that's stupid. Like, why are you doing this? You know, why are you going out in the air? And the answer that you gave me in the beginning, when I was stoked that, you know, the amount of effort and the way you fly is like, it seems very exciting. Like the risk versus reward seems to be a lot more higher. So I get that question from my non-flying friends. And I'm like, the obvious, like, you know, school of thought is that I want to be under a wing, or I'm flying an equipment that does not fail. Like, I trust in the equipment failure should not happen. That is the first rule of the game. That is why I play the game. And I think that is what you're saying. The first rule of this game is that the collapse does not come. And that is why we are playing it, because that rule is usually, it holds true. So when we're trying to build collapse resistant, you know, when we're like putting most of our eggs in rule number one's basket, you know, because that is like, it has to be collapse resistant, then we can have more fun. Why can't we get inspiration from those kites that have like, is collapse a safety behavior? Like, why can't we make wings that just don't collapse? Like, what's stopping the manufacturers?
I think you have to ask the designers. I'm not a designer. I'm not the genius. But I think it has a little bit to do with that certification for the paragliders. As I said, the certification is about making a gentle collapse behavior, which in a way stops manufacturers maybe sometimes of building a wing that is very collapse resistant. You can make a wing more collapse resistant, for example, by having the A-lines further back. But if you have the A-lines further back, you cannot, it gets very hard to certify the wings because collapses tend to be bigger and deeper. And then also it doesn't work as good for SIVs. Yeah. So, but I think, you know, that technology with those reflex airfoils, that is rather new. That is, I mean, there's many paragliders out there that actually have reflex built in and people just don't know. So the Moustache is not like this crazy new wing that has a technology that no other wing had. There's quite many gliders out there that have a reflex airfoil in there. The Moustache is just the first wing that has combined this with those kite risers, you know, with those flare system. And but my opinion or you know, my experience is that there's quite a lot of wings that don't have reflex, and I think that reflex technology is still kind of a little bit in the early stages. You know, I think brands have been very focused on making paragliders that have a lot of performance, climb well, and that glide really well.
Like that you race, basically.
Yeah, but for any class, you know, like even B wings, you know, have to have a very good performance. But I think in the future that performance can no longer be improved that much because you reach a plateau. You know, I think there's only so much glide you can get with a wing that has aspect ratio 5 and 40 cells. So I hope that in the future the brands will start making wings that are more collapse stable, that are safer and focus less on the performance. I think that's that's what our market needs, and I think there's quite big potential, but this is just a rough guess, like I could be totally wrong. Maybe there won't get much more collapse stable, but I think there is quite some room for improvement for making any of those gliders quite a bit more collapse stable than they are now. But I think it might take time.
I have to ask you something very honestly, Benny, here, because this question has been ringing in my mind ever since I graduated from the school. Because the first question that a student gets after graduating is, should I buy a A-wing or should I buy a low B-wing? And when you come out as a layman, like when you're just, learning to see your body in the air, like learning to sense how life in the air feels like, it's a brand new way of transportation that you have discovered as a human. Pushing the limits into the unknown is a big question. Like, I was researching all kinds of articles. I was trying to reach out to all sorts of information sources that should I buy an A-wing or should I buy a low B-wing? And of course, that feeling or the intimacy that everyone has, there's an intuition which gives you a part of that answer. Until somebody came across and told me that those certifications only matter up to a point, and they're very good for the marketing perspective. But if you really want to be a good pilot, then just go by the feel of it, and then just go by what you see in the manufacturer rather than what the certification is saying about the manufacturer. Because certification does tell you how it reopens or how it kind of recovers, but it does not tell you how often it gets into that configuration or how often it gets to shit. And then I started reading the documents, the certification documents, like what kind of, like the details about it. But is certification a bit more irrelevant than what it is? And is it holding back the R&D in the sport of paragliding, at least up to some point? Because people are emphasizing on something that does not really have that kind of weight so much.
I think it's great we have that certification. If we wouldn't have the certification, then brands they would cheat a lot more, and I think the wings will be a lot sketchier out there. There would for sure be brands, probably big brands that totally have the trust from the customers and try not to cheat. But I think there will be quite some gliders out there that are doing quite well, but for certain configurations, for certain maneuvers or something, they will totally fail because no one would test it. So I think it's good we have that certification system, but in a way it's also a little bit overrated. I think there's still quite differences, I think, from one glider to another, and also, as you said, it only says how a wing reacts when it does collapse. It doesn't say how much it takes until a wing does collapse. That would be actually a very interesting, number if you could compare this, but that's obviously impossible to do. But I think that's quite an important thing as well, especially with smaller wings when you fly close to the ground, because having a collapse close to the ground is always a bad thing. Like, it doesn't matter how gentle or bad the collapse is going to be, So I think anytime you fly close to the ground, it's really important to not get a collapse at first hand.
Makes sense. I could keep on going on and on about this question. It is so deep and so interesting with certification and the amount of fun that it allows you to have. But the profile of a kite, which basically inflates the leading edge. There are so many kites that inflate the leading edge, and after that, they just don't collapse. Like, they're not like the foil kites. Or maybe are they the foil? Like, the kite that builds a tube on its leading edge, which you inflate.
Yeah.
Why can't we have that technology to resist collapses in paragliding? Like, what's stopping us to make paragliders completely collapse resistant with something like that, which is flexible yet kind of taut when you need it?
I think they did this back in the days, but I think that you can still fall into your own wing. I think at some stage it might be good that the wing actually gives in and collapses, but honestly, I haven't done too much research of that, but I know this has all been tested and they've all came away from this. Also, like closed cells, like the the foil kites have, like air wolves or airlock system that the air goes in, but it can't come out anymore of the paraglider. This has all been tested, and this is all been not used anymore because it was too dangerous, So I guess at some stage it's good if things can collapse. Yeah.
So the collapse. Sorry, go ahead.
Who knows? Maybe we'll have again wings in the future that have an airlock system. I don't know. I think you get a bit more stability if you have a closed cell wing than when you have the leading edge open. But yeah, we'll see. Time will tell. Probably not for thermaling, but who knows? Maybe Mustache 10 is gonna have closed cells again. I don't know. I don't think so, but yeah.
No, so well, we can stay excited because at least the Mustache 1 has promised to deliver so much fun. So the time coming up front looks really amazing. Benny, I quickly want to touch upon the topic of analyzing a few things, but analyzing challenges in the art of flight that we want to practice. But before I get that, I want to get some perspective from the manufacturer side, because you have been involved in some way with these new technologies that are coming and redefining the way you have fun in the air. Often we have seen, designers break away or merge or like come out with their own version of revolutionary technologies and having fun. Like, there are designers who are working with big brands saying that I'm going out and starting my own brand, and brand hiring still reputable names. And when you see, like, we see gliders going in from 3-liner Cs to 2-liner Cs and then 2.5 B, and like every other time there is a new product launch, the manufacturers claims that it is the safest way to have fun at this risk versus reward spectrum. When a customer has to place their trust in a new product, what kind of research can you put behind? Like, how do you determine that what amount of R&D and what amount of effort has gone into bringing this product out? Of course, the legacy factor and the marketing and various things will tell you a lot about the brand. I'm not denying that. But still, when a brand comes up with a brand new technology, how do you as a customer, or if you were in a customer's shoes, how would you determine if this is worth my effort? And along with that, if you can just tell us a little bit, like, how did life look like when this project, even though I understand that you were not the project lead for this, but how did life look like in manufacturer's term during those days at that time?
I think for most customers, for most pilots, it's impossible to figure out. And how much effort has been put into a wing from a brand. And I also think it doesn't matter. Sometimes those designers, they draw something and the first prototype, it's amazing. At Swing, doing speed wings, we've tried 10 prototypes, and at the end we went for the first one.
Wow.
But obviously, I think they're wings that brands make, 30, 40, 50 prototypes because they needed to reach what they want. So I don't think it matters how much effort has been put into it. What matters at the end is the final product and how it's working, how stable it is, how good it climbs, how good the performance it is, and how safe it is. But I think for a normal pilot, even for me as an instructor, this is pretty hard to find out these days. Yeah, so I think I think there's something missing in our community. I was thinking the other day about making a website that would basically record all the collapses or all the incidents with every wing. So every wing on the market out there would be registered on that website. And then every pilot who had an accident or almost accident or some kind of incident with this wing basically puts it up there. So in an ideal world, every pilot would do this, and then you get, let's say 100,000 people there, and there's going to be a ton of data, and then you might see, this wing, there's a lot of people that have accidentally spinned this wing while thermaling, and with another wing you see, this is almost never the case. No one's ever spinned this wing by accident while thermaling, but there's some issue with collapses with this wing or whatever. So I think that would be very interesting to see, and would give us that missing data we don't know. You're right. If you read the marketing text from from a brand that brings out the new wing, you basically feel like I can't fly the old model anymore. It's not safe. I need to have a new one. It's like I'm risking my life
Just because of money.
buying the old one, kind of. And I'm an idiot. Like the new one has so much more performance and is so safer. Like, gotta get the new one. Yeah. Happily, pilots don't fly next to the old model because there would be very few difference. They would be very disappointed in the difference of extra glide ratio they get, I think. So I think to me, this is very overrated nowadays. There's so little, steps to be made in performance from one model to another. Not always, but a lot of times it's very minor differences.
Before I jump on to the next one, I forgot to bring this up. Your tech has basically increased the speed. Do you wildly sometime down the lane see the speed of triple C wings increasing with a little sprinkle of this technology that you guys have on Mustache?
Not at all. I think CCC gliders are faster than a Mustache. The Mustache is actually not a very fast wing. I think there's many two-liners out there that in the same size, they would have the same speed as a Mustache or are even faster than a Mustache.
Yeah.
Because the Mustache has actually a quite thick airfoil. It has, we've actually limited the speed, or Beni has limited the speed from the Mustache on purpose for stability. So a lot of people think the Mustache is that crazy fast wing, but it's actually not true. It's actually much more designed for stability than for speed. But the CCC wings, they are more for speed and glide than for stability.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, and I think there are CCC wings that have a bit of reflex in there, and there's CCC wings that don't have it. There's both. Yeah, so this is, as I said, this is not a crazy new technology in the Mustache. I think it's just a smart choice of parameters for that type of wing that Beni did. Yeah.
Makes sense. I'm curious when you say that you guys had to limit the speed on this because it was probably getting way too fast and way too much fun for everyone. But did you guys fly one of those factory branded no limited, like no holds bar editions that you guys have kept for yourself, or do you guys fly the commercial ones as well?
No, you got me wrong. The Mustache always been limited. We haven't actually made much faster Mustaches.
So but you could if you wanted
limited. But if Beni would want to make faster Mustaches, he would clearly know how to make them faster.
Wow. Okay.
But he has already from the very beginning decided to not make it crazy fast, but to make it to build it more for stability instead of speed, Yeah. So if we fly the standard Mustache, yeah.
No, well, exciting. Anyways, coming back to the gray area that you said when new technologies are, it's almost impossible for a customer to kind of put their effort and kind of know where to research to know how much effort has gone in from manufacturer side. And of course, we see people getting surprised, of course, unknowingly when trying out new technologies, and 2-liner Cs and 2.5-liner Bs, which probably will go to 2-liner Bs as well, the way we are progressing. We see people kind of getting into unpleasant situations, and I've seen you've had extensive write-ups of how to deal with those kind of things and how to figure out. So if someone has to do that kind of like research that you put in while writing those write-ups, like is it just from experience, or is there a certain way of things that you look at how a wing behaves, or like how do you gather the information that gives you that outlook on an incident or a new wing, basically, is what I'm curious about.
I think it's super difficult as a normal pilot. There's not something I could say like, okay, this is how you can figure this out, how a wing should be, how a safe wing should look like. This is like even for me, I'm not 100% sure which wing is safer than another. This is so hard to tell, and at the end, the only way you can tell is by making thousand wing and sell them, and after 3 years you see how it worked. Basically that's you know, also for the brands, they know a wing very well, but at the end of the day, you these are test pilots, and if a test pilot doesn't want to get a collapse, he doesn't get a collapse. But how the customer that flies that B wing that is not a test pilot, how he gets along with it, it's always a bit of mystery also to the brands, and that's what the market shows in those 2-3 year cycle where the wing is used. So I think it's pretty difficult to find these things out. Yeah, and it's mostly experience and personal experience, but also experience from other pilots, videos I've seen, stories that pilots have told me, things like that.
Makes sense, and thank you for your honesty, because a lot of people in this situation, if they represented or like were face of a brand, would just say that no, we have done the research, so just believe us for it. But I think, as you said, wait for the technology to be there for a while before putting your trust into it. Am I getting it correctly?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, sure, we've flown those wings before the Moustache was sold. There were, I think, we had 10 Moustaches for 1.5 years or almost 2 years that have been flying in from good pilots all over the world in extreme situations, in very different situations. I was using it for speed flying. Some other guys were soaring with it, and together we've collected many hours on those Moustaches, on those pre-serial wings before it actually got sold. And same thing now with the line. We've done hundreds, probably thousand, flights with different line wings and sizes before it's been sold. So we know that it's working, but again, we also know the limits of it and when not to use it, and what to do if it's turbulent, and how the customer essentially uses it then is another thing, which is always a bit of a question.
I feel like there should be an industry standard. Like, I don't know if it is there in commercial aviation or when you have these fighter jets, which are being produced on the military lines, that there should be a wing that should go under mandatory amount of hours of flying before it is out there in the market. Because I think as a manufacturer with some bit of financial backing, it's so easy to approach a factory who manufactures these kind of things, say that, hey, here's the money, here's the minimum order quantity, let me get my toys and let me go out there and market them as best as I can and try to make a living out of it. So I think if we have that standard where the amount of test flying hours are kind of dictated, that you need these many hours, that will be a really good standout for the industry in time to come, I guess.
It sure would help, but I think at the end is, it's still the certification that, or some kind of certification that needs to be there before a wing, can be sold. And, at Flair, we would like having a certification for the Moustache, but this is not possible with the current certification. You just can't put a Moustache through that. It's just not made for this, but who knows, maybe one day we'll have something in the future. Yeah.
But what scares me is that we as a consumer are basically making Instagram videos as certification, like the algorithms that show us the social media is what is playing with our minds as consumers, that, hey, that wing looks so much fun. That wing we don't see a lot of gnarly stuff about that wing out there. And it basically subconsciously is telling your brain that it's okay to put trust in that wing, but that's through a 6-inch phone screen or a 5-inch phone screen, which does not tell you the reality. And certification being very limited, you can only put so much trust into that. So it's kind of like lost path that I'm searching, like the answer that I'm searching for. But the only way is that, okay, man, if you're so keen, then go out and try it for yourself. But then in today's digital age, like, I wish we had a bit more data points with the help of AI and everything to, just streamline this a bit more, because there's a substantial amount of people doing this to make it commercially viable, to invite that kind of R&D into our sport and to make it more accessible and get even more people the joy of the art of flight that we all have.
Yeah, I totally agree. It would be nice to have more data, as I said, like that website or whatever for me would be. It for sure would be nice also for the brands to have more accurate data about how the wings work, and yeah, in real life with the pilots that it's made for, I think. Yeah, maybe you talked about the progression at the beginning of the show, and whether it's paragliding or speed flying or speed riding, I think, as I said, it's important not to push the limits and not to get bad experiences, because it throws you back. You're gonna get fear, which you might deal with. You can deal with it, or maybe not. Like I've once used my reserve while flying thermals, and I couldn't fly cross country for the last 5-6 years. I had more fear than joy. So I just
Wow.
didn't
Sure.
bother flying cross country for like 5 years, I think. And now somehow last year I felt like, hey, I want to go back into it, and I still have fear, but now I had more joy again. And so I think it's very important to not rush things and to do things step by step. Like there's instructors that tell you, hey, you need 3 years of experience before you can do this. I'm like, no, 3 years doesn't help shit. I have sometimes people that want to come to a speed flying course and say, I fly for 20 years now, have quite a lot of flights, and I want to get into speed flying now. And then I'm like, okay, how much flights do you have? And they're like, oh, I didn't count. Like, okay, sounds very experienced. And then I'm like asking, yeah, is it 20? Is it 200? Is it 2000? And they're like, I'm sure it's 150. And then, okay, he did 150 flights in 20 years. Like, okay, you should better not speed fly, I'm really not the instructor that tries to hold people back from progressing. I think it's amazing if someone wants to progress quickly, but you have to do it step by step. So especially speed flying. Speed flying it's quite an easy to learn sport. It looks really extreme, and it's obviously very dangerous if you fuck it up. But you can get into it very quickly. You can get on a smaller size pretty quick. If you're not working, if you can go fly every day and you can get your flights numbers up really quick, you can take a very quick progression. Same thing in paragliding. The other day I had a guy here in the course. He worked for Microsoft. He's paragliding for 2 years now, and he's flying at Zeno, and he's flying PWC. I was like, wow, that's a fast progression. But he quit his job, and all he did in 2 years is paragliding. I'm sure he's a safe pilot. And I think that's, I always try to, or when people tell me, hey, what need to I be able to do to fly mustache? And I'll tell them, okay, you gotta have to deal with the speed and the roll, and not tell them, oh, you gotta have 2 years experience. 2 years doesn't say anything, there's a lot of instructors out there that try to keep people off from doing something because they know they're not ready for them, but it doesn't help them just tell them, oh, this is dangerous, don't do it. I think it's much better if you tell them, hey, you can do this, but this is what you have to have in your skill set. You got to have this first, and this, and once you got those skills, then you can do that next step and learn this safely. And I think that's very important, And it's funny, sometimes in the speed flying courses, people are surprised of what sort of wing I already give them. They wouldn't expect to fly a lion on the first day, But because I know the pilots and I know what they can do or not, then this works. Yeah, so I think it's super important to progress step by step and not to jump any steps, to be safe, basically, and also to be current, Also, a common thing I see a lot is that people think like if they can fly acro really well, it's going to help them a ton for flying cross country. It might help them a little bit when they're about to fall out of the sky, but it's not going to help them to prevent the collapse. If you want to fly cross country, what you have to be able to do is fly active, right? You want to not let collapses happen. And to stop collapses, you have to learn to fly active. And to learn to fly active, you can't do this in an SIV over a lake. You can learn to deal with collapses, but preventing collapses, you only learn by exposing yourself to turbulence and learn to fly active.
Wow, so much sense in there.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, it's true for each individual thing. If you want to speed fly, cross country doesn't help you. I've had in the same course, I've had super experienced cross country pilot, and I've had a ex-student with a half-year license, but a bloody good skier. And you couldn't, by looking at how they were flying, you couldn't tell who was like super experienced cross-country pilot and who was a pretty fresh pilot. I think that's also super important to respect, is that every discipline requires its own skills. Of course, you learn speed flying a little quicker if you're a super experienced cross-country pilot, but at the end of the day, it's a different sport and it's got its own rules. Same thing for speed riding, and same thing for acro flying, and same thing for paragliding. And I realized that as well. I sometimes do tandem flights here in town with the tourists. And for example, last year, I've done one flight. So when I took my tandem out recently, I realized I was super rusty. Like all my speed flying, all my mustache flying, all the cross country flying I did last year, it helped me zero for flying tandem. I really felt not comfortable doing big wing overs and then the landing, and it felt so weird to me. So yeah, I think each discipline is very different. And it needs, if you want to be good at a discipline, you need to be current at that discipline. And just because you're current at another discipline doesn't mean you're automatically current at this other one. I also realized that when I'm sometimes in spring, I don't speed fly much, do other things, fly cross country or mountain biking. And then when I go back speed flying in like August, then I feel like on an 11-meter wing, like, holy shit, this is fast. And I'm like, how was I comfortable on an 8-meter wing last fall? I was like, this is insane. I felt like this 8-meter wing wasn't too hard to fly. And now I feel like this 11 is a crazy weapon. So, and it's just because you're on current. Yeah, I think that's a very important thing I want to get across, that whatever you do, if you want to do it on a high level, you need to be current at this exact discipline, and doing much of another thing actually doesn't help you as much as people think for that other discipline. At least that's for me, but I think it's similar for other people.
There's pure wisdom out there, like in the world's Beni, because this makes airtime is eventual, one of the metrics where you can measure. And if you haven't had airtime in that year, does not matter what amount of airtime you have had in previous years, you are forgetting to feel how your body feels.
Exactly. Totally. In paragliding, cross-country flying, it's about airtime. In, acro and speed flying, it's about numbers of flights, I think.
Yeah.
Because the flights are short, so you have to make it up with the numbers.
No, so interesting. And I think basically what comes to my thought is that when you as a pilot, like, nobody goes in and says that, okay, I'm going to start racing paragliders for the rest of, okay, there are some people who have their inclination towards some sport, but every one of us, when we start our new beginners course, we are pretty much clueless how our minds and how our bodies are going to feel under the wings, or like which discipline will we be choosing? Will we be choosing accuracy, acro, or cross country, or one of these speed things? But as we develop more in the sport, we try to lean towards one discipline more than the others, because I think it's financially and physically impossible to practice everything as a person and get better. But I was wondering if there is someone who says that I really want to push the limit and be really competitive, and I'm going cross country because this is more or less a paragliders podcast, so more of my audience is flying paragliders. If you're pushing cross country and acro in paragliding, and it's rocking your world hard enough, and then you see these new toys out there, which promise to deliver a brand new experience and make your life in the air much more fun and in a very different manner, and you're like, okay, I kind of want to start putting my resources there as well, and I kind of want to start chasing those feelings, like that excitement as well. Is it possible to get better at cross country as well as these freestyle kind of flying that line and maneuver or mustache offers? Because like, will your brain somehow forget how it was to kind of be the best in cross country when it tries to push the limits in freestyle like this, or the vice versa? Like, do you think it is possible to be in conflict of interest in two types of flying? So if you just focus on one, if you're trying to just go absolute hammer at it, like, head down and try to be the best in the world kind of thing.
I don't know. I never tried to be the best in the world. Hard to say. I think in many other sports, this is not possible, like in football or in skiing or in, let's say in some more normal sports that are done by much more people. I think the limit is just way higher than in our sports. I think overall paragliding is still a very new and very small sport that, if you want to fly a, World Cup, you can progress pretty quickly and get there. But if you want to ski downhill World Cup, it's a much longer way to get there, I think, And, speed flying, there's obviously not much competition anymore. And there is acro. I guess acro is pretty difficult nowadays as well to get there, but probably also not like skiing. So I think probably in our sport, there is still room to do two disciplines. I mean, look at Paul Takas, like he's super good at acro. I'm not sure if he's still one of the top pilots, but now he's doing X-Alps and he's flying PWC. Yeah, so if it is possible, then I think much more still in the flying community or the flying sports than in more involved with longer history sports.
No, definitely, and Paul definitely does show the way forward, because he incidentally happens to be the very first guest on Paragliding Atlas. He was very kind to come up and talk about flying in Colombia. That was the very first episode we did. So a super fun guy to hang out, and what an inspiration and what a base of knowledge. Benny, we are almost at the end of the show now. I kind of wanted your closing comments, because of course I've seen the way you look at things and the amount of wisdom you put into your thoughts. Is there something that you wished we as pilots kind of did better in our own flying? Like, is there something that kind of makes you agitated or angry, and you're just like, yes, I wish I could change that for the community, or like I wish the community did things better in that way?
I think what I would wish from the community to do better is, first of all, being like less brand orientated. I feel like many people are married to a brand, and I think every brand has good wings, but sometimes also not the best wing, It's just the way it goes. So I think in general, people are a little bit too brand minded, not enough open minded to other brands. That's one thing. And I think there should be more knowledge resources. There are books, you buy a book of, how to do paragliding and things, but there is, for example, especially in the mini wing speed flying world, there isn't that much reliable or good resources for people that want to teach themselves. And the fact is that a lot of people that get into speed flying, they don't have access to a school. They don't live somewhere where there's actually a school or a mentor that, can watch their progression a little bit and maybe slow them down every now and then or something. And I guess the same thing in paragliding even, So I'd wish there would be like a website with very dedicated, very good advice for those kind of people in our community that do not live in those flying hotspots that have, a ton of schools, like here, as I said, there's 18 schools around here, and there's so many good pilots around Interlaken. We have so many world champions here. Kriegel Maurer lives here. There's, if someone wants to progress and become very good, then there's plenty of pilots he can go and seek, knowledge from. But in a lot of countries, that's not the case. And I wish there would be better resources for those pilots that live somewhere and don't have that.
No, I completely resonate with that answer. And in fact, the reason why I do that is the bottom line of our show, Paragliding Atlas, to make knowledge accessible to wide audiences. And because I was one of those guys before I moved to Europe, where I came from a place where the network of pilots was not that big. I mean, of course, we have a very tiny and a very close-knit, but a very welcoming community where, the knowledgeable and the experienced ones are very open in sharing. But just the whole ecosystem in Europe or in one of these, countries, Western countries, like Switzerland and the Alps, and you go to Bassano and all of that, you're just amongst people who are basically eating, sleeping, and living paragliding or one of these sports all the time. So just access becomes so much easier. But I am doing my own tiny bit through the world of paragliding atlas. So I don't know. Do you guys have something similar in speed flying, or should I start speed flying and start speed flying atlas as well? Is that the
Yeah,
your?
No, this is actually missing. Yeah, I was just thinking that the other day. I don't think there's a Speedfly podcast. I mean, I haven't heard of one.
Right. I mean, to be honest, it's a lot of work, and you probably got an idea when the amount of time I had to get to get you on the show. But it's a resource which just is so magical for people who are not in those locations. So, I'll keep that in the back of my mind.
Yeah, I believe you, but I think the speed flying scene is still a very small scene, and what I've seen is the people speed fly for, let's say, 5 years, and then they kind of saturate a little bit. I think there's very few pilots that keep doing this for 10, 15, 20 years, In paragliding, it's much more common. Pilots, they fly for their whole life. But to me, it looks like speed flying is much more of something people consume for a while, and they love it, and they're totally addicted to it. And then it kind of fades off a little bit, it loses a little bit its how to say, its rush when you do it, when you've done it too much, and then people go on, and maybe fly more cross country or do acro or other things. I've seen a lot of pilots that I've taught once and were really into it, and then kind of progressed to something else, which I think it's amazing, If I wasn't an instructor and a test pilot, and we're doing all of these new things, then it might be the same for me. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, so maybe we're still a bit of a small scene for having our own podcast, but I definitely think it's growing, the speed flying, and I think especially with the latest technology we have on the parakites, is it for coastal soaring or is it for speed flying now with a line? This makes it much more attractive flying small wings, and I see more and more people flying small wings. Like here in Switzerland, like mini wings, high can fly wings, like a Bantam or a Cody P, like those 16, let's say 14 to 18 meter wings, they have the last few years, they have become like way more popular. There's so many pilots that have their cross country wings, they have their acro wings, but they also have one of those small high can fly wings, which is awesome. Yeah. I think it's a good direction. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that. And people love it. Yeah.
No, so nice to hear that. It's growing progressively. And what basically, like, what holds me back from speed flying is that I think, like, it doesn't allow you to tell you a story. Basically, like, the experience is so quickly finished. You put your stuff in the car in the morning. You go out, you take a ski lift up, and boom, few seconds later you're down on the ground. And then you keep on doing that over and over again, and then you come back to your home. It's not like a paragliding expedition where, like, okay, you put your stuff in the car, you go out there, you fly for a while. So you have experiences to talk about in the end of the day when you sit after a long cross country flight. Or, I mean, acro is kind of similar, where you finish the day and come back to your own home. But I think, like, the romance of a cross country flight is that it gives you so much to talk about, that that is basically what kind of keeps it going, and that is why storytelling is a bit more easier in the world of paragliding than it will be in speed flying, in my opinion. Because I don't want to lose out altitude so quickly. It's like I want to be in the air. So, like, this line just got so much easier now. I don't feel my brain telling me that, oh my god, what am I getting myself into? Do you think it's like one of these reasons why it's kind of like, skimming, getting out of people's life after a while?
I think so, yeah. But, it's at the same time, it's not for everyone. It doesn't have to be for everyone, speed flying. And I'm glad it's not for everyone. If every paragliding pilot would speed fly, it would be banned everywhere, I think.
100%. I can just imagine the amount of calls a rescue service would get every single paraglider pilot at 11 meter on their head.
Yeah, probably. I mean, that's the nice thing about the flying, right? There's so many different disciplines, and you start with something and you eventually move to something else because your interests shift, or maybe your possibilities, your time, whatever. That's totally fine. I see a lot of pilots here that have been keen pilots in different disciplines, and sooner or later what they end up doing is hike and fly, and they run up, they fly down because they become dads and they have family, and more busy at their job. But yeah, so they try to still stay fit and do sport, and at the same time they combine it with paragliding, so they end up doing hike and fly. Yeah, that's the nice thing about our sport, that it's got something to offer for everyone.
For sure, for sure. And I think, before I let you go for the day, Beni, one of the, like, if you can share the experiences, like, how does, I mean, if our audiences can get a glimpse of how does life look like in life of a test pilot who's getting access to all these brand new toys every time?
It's exciting. It's cool always, like especially with the parakites now being able to be part of that revolution. Yeah, especially because I'm always interested in those new things and the possibility you get with those new things. Yeah, I'm super stoked. I'm part of the Flare team, and yeah, we are looking for forward where this is all leading us and bringing us. Where this Flare system has potential or not. Yeah, it's we've only just started the journey. Yeah, I think there's many more great wings to come, hopefully, from Flare. Yeah.
Wow. Wisdom and excitement all summed up in one sentence is what I can see, in time to come from the brand Flare. But Beni, Kälin, thank you for such an honest and, absolute pure of an interview from the bottom of your heart. I think we have successfully managed to put across to our audiences why they should stay excited and like what's coming, and basically more fun in our sports of paragliding and speed flying. So fingers crossed, keep up the good work. You seem to be winning at life by making money out of this full time. So definitely there's something right. I'm kind of wait to see what comes from Go Flare Global.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me, and I hope to meet you someday somewhere, and I hope to see your smile one day when you flew a line.
Likewise, for sure.